Give it a sec. A little secity sec. Boom, stream.
Tiger bite.
Tiger bite. Yeah, I came in here and I was like, Tiger bite. Greg, let me buy a case of that. He's like, okay. Because it's all the cases out in the hallway.
Oh, really?
We are so loud. I love it. I usually have to like turn everyone way up because they're super quiet.
Oh, we're too loud.
I'm looking at this and it's like spiking. All right.
Problematic.
Bam. In the studio, Team Early as Fuck podcast. We've got Adam Greuel. How are you, sir?
Excellent, Bill.
Dude, you just been getting after today outside doing some work?
Crushing it.
Yeah?
Keeping it diverse.
I like it. So because you're all over the place. You're touring, you're playing a show last night, you're working for the Garden Guru who's been on the podcast. What else you got going on?
Oh, man. Well, right now, landscaping at my parents' house.
Yeah.
My sister has a wedding coming
That's right.
up.
I saw the signs out when I went and bought some syrup.
Yeah.
That's
it's
exciting.
Getting crazy over there. There's a sense of, being that it's at my parents' house, they have a sense of, landscaping perfection in their brain. But being that they're 67, where does that land? But on the 28-year-old son here.
That's exactly how my parents are as well.
So
they've got all these great visions and plans, and then it falls on me.
Yes, the strapping young lad. Doing that in between being on tour. Summer touring season is hectic.
Mm-hmm.
It's the time where you make hay, to use the farming reference. Make hay when the sun's shining. You make music when the sun's shining too.
I like it. Oh shit! I just pushed the wrong button. All right, so I'm gonna go back and make sure that sounds okay.
Okay.
How'd that feel for an intro?
Good.
And then from there, once again, someone's fucking with something. Oh my god, bastards!
Is this being recorded?
No. No, they change it to regular microphone. It's like, why would you do that?
Yeah. Probably just don't know.
It's like, we have this soundboard. Why would you use?
Oh, like the onboard. So was that not actually recorded?
It was recorded.
Oh, gotcha.
Oh. And you said you didn't want to use your mic?
What?
So I'm going to unplug the splitter. Not a big fan of the splitter.
Didn't want to use what? What did you say?
Your headphones.
Oh, no. I'm good.
Okay. How does recording work?
I don't even like to wear them in the recording studio.
Really?
What I usually do is put them on my head and have one ear off, one ear on. I don't like the insular feeling.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Plus, my head gets warm.
Bam. Also true. Yeah, these get stupid warm. Okay, so, bam. We'll redo the intro.
Okay.
And then we'll get the actual podcast rolling.
Gotcha.
Bam. That sounds better. That's
Bam.
better. Here we go. In the studio, Team Early as Fuck podcast. We've got Adam Greuel here.
Hello.
Adam.
Hi.
What's up, man?
Hello.
So, Adam here. Horseshoes and hand grenades.
Yes.
What do you maple sap make? What do you want to call yourself?
A sugar maker.
Sugar maker. I like it. Landscaper. Artist. Badass motherfucker. Fisherman. River dweller.
River rat.
River rat. Yeah, there you go. River rat. That was the one I was gonna hashtag the other day and I forgot. Son of a bitch. We could go on. Athlete.
I think maybe past athlete.
Past retired athlete.
Yeah.
We've had many recent conversations about health, fitness, that kind of thing as well.
Yes.
So maybe like what do we want to say? Newcomer to wellness rookie.
Yeah, right. I mean, I've been well, but maybe I should be more well.
More well. So what do you got going on right now? Let's go through like the last couple weeks.
Yeah, so I mean it's summer touring season for Horseshoes, so that's the busy time of the year. You make hay when the sun shines, and yeah, so you're getting ready to just how that looks for us is just basically a lot of like what we call one-offs, maybe flying to, for instance. 2 weekends ago was Aiken, South Carolina. So you fly down, you play a festival, you fly home, you maybe do a run of festivals down in that area. So it's just a lot of travel, and then I've been coming home and working for our friend, Jason Wint, otherwise known as Hog,
the garden
otherwise
guru,
known as the Guru, the spiritual gardener himself.
That's right.
Doing like landscaping stuff, and yeah, and on top of that, my sister's getting married. Coming up on June 8th. So I'm just running on all cylinders, trying to stay sane and being busy. But it's good. It's I don't know. Work suits me to be busy, I guess.
Yeah. You idle hands? Not good.
I think more than like a day or two, it's not good for me. I think it's, there's so much to do in the world, and
for sure.
I mean, I guess maybe, it's good to take some time to just rest and reflect and things like that. But I like keeping her moving, as old Charlie Barron says.
Keeping her moving.
Keeping her moving.
So we've got, where are my feet at? All these things going on. You're all over the place. And then this conversation of wellness pops up, or personal health. So that's like current us, present day Adam, where we're at, kind of making this bigger awareness of your personal health, your personal well-being. Maybe as we get older, I think maybe that happens to all of us naturally.
Oh my gosh, it sure does. Yeah, I remember I was a wilderness ranger once back out in Wyoming.
Yeah.
With the Forest Service, and at the time I was in peak physical shape. It was maybe.
What does that mean? I always want to ask people what that means.
I mean, to me, it's to be able to do whatever you want without like major strife.
I love that.
Yeah, and so I was like hiking all day, every day, and
Wyoming, there's no easy hikes.
No,
there's no green circle.
Up and down. Yeah. So, I loved it out there, and I was in great shape, and my brother came out to visit, and he's, at the time, I want to say he was about 29, like I am now.
Okay.
Or I'm about to be 29.
Yeah.
And, we went for a backpacking trip, and I recall him being utterly gassed, and me being in peak physical shape from being out there. It was odd. Because he was always in such great shape, and I recall him mentioning, and then later on writing it to me in a letter, about how, that had kind of been the point where he was like, oh my gosh, like I am not like a young person anymore who can just do exactly what I set out to do physically without like effort, without, he had kind of gotten out of shape as I sort of have myself. And he just said it was super shocking. And that loss of that feeling is, sort of painful to one's ego.
Yeah.
And, it just struck me as like one of the things that I remember quite vividly in life was that conversation with him, and subsequently a letter that kind of detailed that. And fast forward to today, and months ago, I guess I hit up Bill knowing that, the team early as fuck stuff and the D1 stuff, and just wanted to pick his brain essentially about, health and getting back on track. I had expressed my concerns about being a traveling musician and how difficult it is to keep up with that. And part of that was the product of starting to feel that too.
Yep.
At 28, like starting to, you walk up a long staircase and you feel slightly out of breath and you're like, oh my God.
Death is this much closer.
Yeah, like this is terrifying, and then it's like, could I hike 4 miles, or 5 miles or whatever that hike was with my brother in those days, and make it, and not feel terrible.
Or be eaten by grizzly bears.
Yeah.
When they find you.
You got to be able to run. So, yeah, anyhow, like, the difficulty is really, being on the road. Your bands are typically, if you're a national touring band, as Horseshoes is, you would typically play 4 hours apart every night when you're on a tour. And tours can be up to like 20, 25 days.
Yeah.
And so you play the show, you might have too many beers.
Tiger Bite.
So
Tiger Bite.
Drinking a beer right now. But it can be tough to keep that in the saddle too, but you drink some beers, you play the show, you might not get back to your hotel till between 12:30 and maybe 2.
Machine.
And then you sleep and you wake up and you leave at 10:30, maybe earlier.
Yep.
And you blast, you get to the venue at 2:33, it's time to sound check at 4. So where do you fit in, the physical exercise, which keeps your brain feeling good and your body? It's difficult. It takes some intention.
I like how you say that, intention, the discipline. You should message my buddy Josh that's been on here from Pop Evil.
Okay.
The original drummer for Pop Evil.
Yeah, cool.
So he's very much, he understands what you're talking about. And that guy is like the definition of just insanely disciplined. So
yeah.
He had like barbell, kettlebells, squat rack.
No.
On their
bus.
On their bus.
And me and Sam, our bass player, he recognized this too about himself.
Yeah.
And he's a different build than me. He's a thin guy, but I think he was just feeling a sense of weakness. He's a farmer too.
Yeah.
Aside from being in Horseshoes, so he's busy using his body all the time.
Yep.
I mean, you're riding in a bus, even that 4 hours that you're just like in a bus during the day, like your body's getting soft, So he brought in some barbells, like 30-pound
Seriously,
dumbbells.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So and then I was like, shit. Okay, I gotta do this too, I guess.
Yeah.
And so you're on the moving bus, just like ripping curls or flies or whatever, just trying to get your heart rate up a little.
Think about like the Navy, man. Like my buddy Tanner was stationed in Point for a while. He's in the Navy, and he's got like the craziest fucking stories. He's like, yeah, you just be squatting with a barbell on your back. I'm like, on the ship? Yeah. He's like, you just hope we hit smooth water.
Don't hit a wave. Yeah, well, it's a little bit of that for sure, but it's a total uphill battle keeping your health in good shape on the road, because there's the pressures of booze. For sure, that's the big one. Drugs,
sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah,
Isn't
it's
that
not
what
a
they say?
lie. I mean, maybe the sex part, but it's true. Like, it's a thing. It's part of the music industry for sure. I mean, and part of it relates to the tumult of being on the road. Like, I think alcohol is there for a reason. Like, it helps around the edges of traveling to new places, constantly meeting new people, things like that. So, I get why it's there, and certainly I love drinking.
Yeah.
I like drinking while I play, but it can escalate. Like, when you're at home, I guess I shouldn't speak for everybody, but when you're at home, you're not, drinking several drinks or several beers through the course of the night. Usually, when I'm out on the road at a show, you might drink you could drink a 6-pack and a couple shots or something. When you're at home, you're typically not doing that. So it's an abnormal lifestyle.
Oh, dude, you're like when people look at me for crazy workouts.
Yeah.
That's like when you come back and you're telling me, I'm like,
From a tour.
dude, yeah. And
Like,
I think one time you asked me, Bill, how do you detox from this? I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like, if you put me in that situation, I'd be a pile. You'd be like scraping me up off the floor.
I got into the sauna thing. So
sauna's huge.
Where I live with my friend Danny, which I'm lucky to do. He built a sauna, an outdoor sauna, and as you know, Bill lives down the road.
Yep.
But
I've dipped into that sauna. It's a great sauna.
I got super into it, and I started researching, like, okay, why do I like this? Why is this making me feel better? And what I discovered is that it really doesn't detoxify you.
Nope.
It, like, you don't lose that many toxins through your sweat.
Heat shock proteins.
Yeah. Like, basically just your kidneys is what is actually detoxing you. But I read several articles that it strengthens your heart.
Yep. And
it's like kind of giving your heart a workout without you getting a workout. Obviously, you shouldn't substitute, sitting your ass in a hot sauna for taking a jog, but it apparently does help. And I mean, I can feel it for sure. So I got on that kick when I'd get back from tour. The first thing I do is get in the sauna,
Oh, for sure. So here's me I'm gonna geek out on like the physiology of it, and then I want to bring it back to like the musical world.
Yeah, yeah.
So your body responds to stress. I mean, stress can be good or bad. People will get into distress versus eustress. I don't care about that. I'm just talking about stress in general. Mm-hmm. So lifting up heavy shit, crazy stressful boss or a work day, drinking. Sure. Your body responds to all of it kind of in the same way. Just there's a physiological response. And so what you're talking about with the sauna is heat shock proteins. So they're these cells in your body that react to stressful situations. And in this case, it's a sauna. So your body is physiologically activating all of this gene expression through the stress of the sauna. Yeah. And that's the good things from it that you're talking about. So controlled bouts, just like exercise, just like, a little bit of quote unquote bad food here and there overall strengthens your body. Yeah. You're increasing your immunity to future stress. Yeah. And I always kind of bring that back towards, thinking about like what you do for a living. So from the musical standpoint, like I'm sure you could be having a super shitty, stressful day traveling or just like something's not going the way you were expected it or planned for it to go. And then you expose yourself to a little bit of music that you enjoy. Right. And right after that, all these physiological effects that you weren't even aware of are happening because of the exposure to the stress. Sure. In this case being the music. Yeah. So.
Oh, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, dude. It's
good to break it down like that, isn't it?
It's all connected.
Yeah. It can, a lot of times people go through life without, taking a breath to sort of comprehend what you just described. That's awesome to think about it that way, for sure.
I love it all. And then couple that with where we live. I mean, it sucks. Don't ever move there. You don't want to live there. But just the outdoor element of it, you're combining all of these things. And that's kind of with like the Hike to Hunt program this weekend. If you're listening to this, it'll be after this. But getting people outside and realizing like all these other effects. I'm not saying it's going to cure depression.
I'll tell you, so that's another aspect of being on the road is, you're going to large towns. Yeah. Every night. Uh-huh. And for somebody who lives in the middle of nowhere, essentially, that can be a whole nother aspect of sort of stress.
So I want to pick your brain on this. So how long have you been touring like you do now?
Well, Horseshoes started 10 years ago. Okay. 10 years ago this fall.
That's so fucking awesome. You're coming up on a decade.
A decade.
With the band.
I know.
And it's all the original dudes, right?
No reason that it makes sense that I'm like realizing I need to like get my health back in order. Yeah. But yeah, so we started 10 years ago, and then at that time we're in college.
Yeah, pointers.
And then people are slowly, catching wind about our band, and we started getting booked first across Wisconsin, then the Midwest. And by the time we were graduating college, we were fairly well known around the Midwest, at least in the live music circles.
Yeah.
Obviously, specifically more so in our genre. But the name had gotten around. And then we started graduating, and we were like, man, we could probably keep touring, if we want to. And everybody was kind of on board, and we made some great moves with booking agencies and stuff. Like at one point we sort of formed up with the Majestic Madison.
Okay.
And the folks that own that, Matt and Scott, and so we had this management company that then reached out to all these booking agencies and essentially told the story of Horseshoes and how we were doing in the Midwest.
Nice.
And then there was a group, a handful of booking agencies that were interested in working with us, and we selected one. And then once you're working with a major booking agency, it's very easy to tour the country. So, in terms of touring hard, that started about 5-6 years ago now.
And what was that like, the adjustment?
It was a trip. And various band members dealt with it in different ways. I had always had a vision of achieving this, achieving being a touring band. Like, I always knew it was possible when I met these guys. Like, it was always in my brain as a possibility. So once it occurred, it wasn't perhaps as shocking to me as it was a couple of the other members.
Yeah.
Like, I'll never forget, and it sort of lives in infamy in my head for a couple of reasons, but one of our first big tours was like 30-some days. It was like 32 days.
It's a long time.
It's too long. It's too long. I mean, there's no question about it. For any human, I think that's pushing it.
Yeah.
But that tour happened, and it was remarkable. It was, supporting one of the biggest bands in our genre, probably the biggest band without a doubt these days, Green Sky Bluegrass.
Nice.
And we're out with them, and I think some of the rigors of the road, like we've talked about, took root, and at the end of that, there was a lot of question marks about if this was what we wanted to actually be doing.
Yeah.
And it was that.
It was it. For you, though, I'm sure you were like, no, this is what I fucking signed up for.
To some degree.
But I'm sure there was fear.
Right. It's one of those be careful what you wish for kind of a things, because you're excited to be doing it, and there's a lot of really awesome qualities of being on the road playing music. I mean, playing music's awesome. Like, you love that. Love, meeting new people, things like that. But, it takes a toll on your brain and also your body. And so we got back, and I think an interesting topic for, to go back to intention. It was around that time where we realized, like, we need to be in control of ourselves and our entity, and not, a booking agent wants you to play as many dates in a year as possible. They see you as a money making device, as an entity. They, their job isn't to care for your well-being. I mean, I'm sure they do, within reason. But, when they see your band, they see something that needs to function. They don't see 5 hearts and
And how old were you at this time?
What
was the average age, you think?
24, 25.
So yeah.
So we're like, so we sort of started to realize, like, okay, we need to run this ship a little closer, and we need to be touring how we want to tour. So there was some, work to kind of figure out what that would look like. And these days we don't tour for more than 10 days at a time. There's no question about that. And if there's a 10-day tour, we probably won't tour again for another 20 days or something. So you figure out these ways to balance kind of for your own sanity.
Yep.
And, there's home life, there's girlfriends, there's, now wives.
Yep.
There's a
farm.
There's a farm. Sam, has an organic farm down in Milwaukee. There's Colin which is a whole nother story. He, while we were a national touring band, got his law degree.
That's insane.
So he's a lawyer, which is hilarious and awesome. Super proud of him.
Was that just out of prevention for the band? Like,
yeah, we need a lawyer as soon as possible.
One of us should probably go to law school.
deal with our problems. No, so there was things to tend to at home. So figuring out the balancing act. You and I have talked about balance, about how it's like, in regards to health, it's not about maybe cutting something out, but figuring out how to reduce it or do it within reason, and like alcohol, for instance.
Yeah.
So yeah, we figured out slowly but surely we found a more sustainable sort of method or structure, and I think now everybody's pretty happy and content with the way we do it, and it's not as good on the pocketbook as it would be if you worked your ass off and played those 30-day tours.
Yeah.
But I mean, pictures of dead presidents.
Yeah, exactly. And what you're talking about too, because I recently had a podcast talking about this in the health and the sports medicine world, talking with a friend of mine who's a physical therapist, started his own physical therapy clinic, did that whole setup. But the way it's traditionally set up, talking about like what you're talking about with the booking agencies, the insurance companies see your clinic as a way to make money, and they're like, as many patients coming through, they're interested in the patient's well-being, but at the end of the day, it's, well, how many treatments, how many modalities, how many therapies can we do to bill people, because that's the way the system is. What you're talking about from the booking agency, what I'm talking about from medicine or any system that we've created in our culture, is it needs to exponentially grow, right? There's no end in sight. It's just grow, make money.
It's funny you say that, because that's exactly the words that were brought up.
Yeah.
This weird concept of exponential growth, like we needed to get away from that.
Yep.
It's so funny that you would use that particular word, because it was so contentious for so long. Our bass player Sam was kind of spearheading this. To his credit, he sort of was ahead of the curve for us, and saying like, hey, how are we looking at this? Like, are we looking at it in like terms of exponential growth? Like, we need to get up to a point where we're like the next Green Sky Bluegrass. Like, how are you guys seeing this? And it really made me take a step back and say like, no, like that's not why I'm doing this. Like, I think why I'm doing this is to enjoy life's moments and do something I love with the people I love, and make a living doing something I don't hate, which has been my goal forever, and always will be.
Fucking amen.
Too. Yeah,
I'm fucking drink to that.
Right. Yeah, I know. It's just like various people in my life have made their living from doing things they didn't love, and I saw the stress that it evoked in them. And not to say that what I do isn't stressful. I definitely have a bundle of stress, the point where I've suffered from panic attacks and things like that in the past. And it's I can sort of laugh about it, but also serious. For me, it's a very difficult process to sort of deal with that. But moral of the story is seeing this with other people, seeing the degree of stress it brings up from doing stuff you hate. It's like, man, we have one life. I'm not really sure what happens after.
No.
Like, hopefully I'm going to be a coyote or something. A red fox. Maybe not a fox. You'll trap me.
I would trap you. Either of those will trap you.
But, like...
But you'd be a wily coyote.
Yeah, very
one of those ones that doesn't get trapped. There's some of those in existence.
I'd be a Looney Tune.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyhow, just like trying to stay stay thankful for the life we have and use it in a way that I feel is good and maybe helpful. Like, I know songs, music has a way of pulling out the sort of spiritual side of a person. And I think that's part of why folks come to listen to shows, is because it kind of can pull feelings and sentiments out of people that they maybe didn't know they were having or were not able to process without music. Kind of like nature does that too.
Oh, for sure. Oh man, you just like, my mind's blowing up right now. So you kind of had this, I'm going to go on the nature and I'm going to come back to the music. I recently was talking with someone and we were looking at the exact same picture of nature. And to me, I was like, oh, I'd love to go there. Like,
yeah,
like these thoughts of like what you would see for landscape, for different trees, like talking about trees and trying to like actually learn trees as a hunter, someone who enjoys the outdoors, especially after talking to Jeremy from Tapped Maple Syrups. I'm like, I'm an idiot when it comes to trees, but they look at that picture and they get anxiety. Yeah. They're like, I'm scared. The trees are too close.
That would be lonely.
I would be lonely.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh shit, it's so crazy that you can get that different experience from looking at it. And then you're talking about music and it's like the same thing. Like someone can listen to a song and be like driven to tears or like fucking wanting to like run up a mountain. And then you or I listen to it like, oh.
It's the whole reflection of self thing, right? Like,
ooh, I'm sure let's dive deep into this. Yeah. You've thought about this before.
Oh, totally. Like how, well, it's like you just explained it. Like, somebody can see, if I see a beer bottle in a unopened beer, I'll look at it and be like, huh, yeah, well, I wonder if I can drink that. Like look around, whose beer can I have that beer?
Whose beer is that?
But say somebody who suffered from the trauma of alcohol abuse or had really negative effects on their life, they might see that and think to themselves, oh man, like I could never go back to those days. That stresses me out.
That's
see that
point.
So it's like it just goes back to the human experience. Like what happened when you were a kid, what trauma have you had? What joys have you experienced in life? I know, there's a song in particular that Horseshoes does, Wisconsin Waters.
I fucking love that song.
That can be the most bizarre thing to watch from stage because I'll be up there and I'll sing it, and the song means a lot to me too. I recall vividly the evening that I wrote that. But I'll be on stage singing that and I'll look out and like sometimes I have to close my eyes because there's so much going on. Like, you can kind of see people's emotions in a way. Like you don't always know what's going on in somebody's head, but you can feel them when you look. You can get basically an idea of how somebody's feeling. Sometimes I'll open up my eyes and I'll look out, and there's just so much happening. Like there's some
you're
people
getting all this
massive
nonverbal.
smile. Some people are just bawling their eyes out, and it feels good to me because I want, I feel like if you can help somebody feel their emotions and experience them and let it out, then it's helpful. It's good. It gives me a sense of purpose in music.
We don't have with like as much technology, convenience, comfort as we have today. A lot of, like we were talking about earlier, a lot of people go their whole lives. Somehow they have discipline and the intention of lasting for 30, 40 years in a job they fucking hate.
I know.
And then they survive with like these brief moments. And
nothing could cause me more. The thought of doing that stresses me out.
And then here you are up on stage. You've been impacted by music, and I definitely want to get into that. And like, you write this song about Wisconsin waters because, once again, where we live, don't move there, it sucks. But access to the water and what that's done to you to write this song. And then you write this song and you see all this nonverbal communication that we've become so bad at reading from people. Like, we don't have as much of it anymore.
Yeah.
Just because of the way
that
everything's so fast. We're all so busy. Communication's very fast. It's all technologically based. And then you're up there pouring your energy because you talked about this earlier, like you're exhausted from being a musician because all of your energy goes into creating this and then replicating that every
Right.
time you're on stage. So you're pouring all this energy in, and then you're getting that from everyone in the audience.
Right.
And that's a fucking lot
the circle is interesting. You know, and I should say I was thinking as you provoke this thought, you know, I'm talking a lot about like, you know, focusing on doing things that you love with your life and trying to find maybe a job that works with that. And I know that that's not the case for a lot of people. And I'm not saying by any means that that's the wrong route or that there's one way to do this, because I think it functions appropriately for a lot of folks to get a job that is, you know, provides them with financial security and, you know, maybe is real structured. Like there's a certain brain style that fits really well with, and they go to work, they do something they don't necessarily love,
but it's structured.
It's structured. It works for them. They get off, and then they get to enjoy their life. You know, and on a sort of different.
They get the dead presidents.
Yes.
And that allows them to go do shit they love.
And
which
there's
is
nothing
awesome.
wrong. Nothing.
No,
you know, so I wanted to circle back because it almost sounds like I was like ragging on that perspective, but I'm not by any means. You know,
Frank, the physical therapist, told everyone to quit their jobs on the podcast. So you're doing a great job.
Turn off the TV and quit your job.
Frank's just like, fucking quit your job.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's cool. I love it, Frank. Like Frank's, he's fucking awesome. But no, they should understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, you know, I wanted to throw that out there because, you know, it's one person's experience. You know, so there's so many different styles of a person. There's so many, you know, it's really like about being you and finding what fits for you. Like, you know, what fits for me isn't what fits for you, or what fits for, you know, Hog or other buddies. I mean, you look at it, even our neighborhood, and you can like, there's so many different personalities.
Oh, it's so awesome.
All in one space, and it's a really wonderful thing. But it's a great like little case study on how different people function and what works for different people. Like, you know, like is, you know, even like in a work environment, does somebody respond to what kind of criticism is it? You know, do you give positive feedback? Do you have to just say this is bullshit, this is terrible? You know, like how do people react to that stuff? I just, you know, we live in such a diverse time, and also we live in a world full of, you know, diverse people. Like not just in terms of cultural background, but also just in terms of like personality type.
How we all kind of perceive what's going on is so interesting. I love it.
What works for different people, like what, you know, what leads to happiness, if that's even the goal to begin with.
Right? God, what the fuck? I was just reading a book on that, and it was super just like, we all talk about happiness, but it's like, is that really what we want?
My homie said this to me the other day, and it's been turning in my brain since. You know, because I speak about happiness a lot, or I think about happiness. Like, I want people to be happy. Like, you know, I myself want to be happy. But he said that his goal in life is more to be challenged and to grow.
Yeah.
And I was like, which we all know, challenge isn't necessarily going to make you happy all the time. I mean, it may. But I just thought that was such an interesting thing. Like, okay, so what am I going for happiness, or am I going for, is happiness the product of being challenged
and overcoming
like, what, there's so much to unpack there. Like, what is the goal? Like, what are we trying to do in life? Like, you know I want to feel good.
Yeah, and for each of us, that's so different. That's why I wanted to ask you what your definition of peak physical fitness was.
Yeah.
Because for me, that is one of my favorite parts of being a coach and doing what I do from the physical fitness point of view, is hearing these stories from people, you know, that come in. And I work with 6-year-olds all the way up to my oldest client is 85.
Wow.
So hearing
crazy. Talk about diverse.
Yeah.
You know? So
hearing from the 6-year-old and then listening to the 85-year-old, like, what is it you want? What are your goals? What is making you come here and put in this effort, this work, when so many people don't?
Yeah.
You know, only like 15% of the population has like a quote unquote gym membership. I would, you know, more people than that obviously exercise and do other things that keep them physically fit, which is awesome. But I just always want to know. And then what brings people there? Like, what have they struggled with? Where do they think they've failed?
Right.
Because it's always the person that's, I've tried everything, nothing's worked.
Yeah.
I'm a failure, blah, blah. It's like, no, that's getting them to realize that's part of their journey.
Yes.
Like maybe that didn't work.
Yeah.
And you did fail at that thing, but that doesn't mean you are a failure. Like we're going to work together. I want to hear your story. Like for me, when I work with someone, especially one-on-one, like the first meeting is just me talking to them and listening to their story. Like I want to know where you've come from.
How important do you think optimism is in that puzzle?
Optimism is super important, and not from like I'm going to always be smiling, chipper, you know, piss rainbows and all that kind of stuff. Not that kind of optimism, but the kind of optimism that you realize you are striving for a better version of you.
Yeah.
That kind of optimism, if that makes sense.
I think so. I mean, I think optimism is a pretty important aspect of success, quote unquote, in life. I mean, it's kind of like related to the concept of you like willing something.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Sometimes, like, you know, people ask me like,
manifest destiny.
Young, yeah. Sort of, but different. But you know, like sometimes young musicians will hit me up. It used to happen like very often, like, you know, via social media or something. Hit me up like, hey, how did you do? Like, how did you get where you guys have gotten?
Yeah. Like,
how's your music career gotten to where it's gotten? Which, you know, it's an interesting question. And it makes me think about that. Like, okay, so how did this happen? And I think the moral of the story is, if I had to unpack a bunch of things, it's a mixture of hard work and optimism. Like the belief that one will succeed.
Yep.
It really is a strange, energetic relationship that goes on. That's almost like, I don't want to say it's unexplainable, because I think there's ways to make it make sense, but the belief that things are going to go in the right direction almost like guides your action, which then leads to you getting where you intended on going. You know, so that kind of tripped that trigger in my brain. You talking about someone improving their health, it's like you really need to believe it. You know, in my own health journey, for instance, was, you know, like a while ago when you and I talked. It was like knowing, okay, this is what I need to do, and I can do it. People do it all the time. It's about knowing that it's possible and having the optimism and the belief that you can achieve something. I think that's so important.
I love that. And so we're going to dive deep, Adam. I hope you're ready. So when you're talking about this optimism and this kind of will to succeed and this love of challenge, because you're definitely someone who likes that. You, for the things you are passionate about, I definitely know that you love a challenge, and that you're self-critical, and you're also optimistic. Like those, I think, are the potent duo, is like being self-critical and being optimistic at the same time. And for you, I want to dive into like go way back. So when you think about where you're at now, horseshoes and hand grenades, what you want to do with your career, kind of what are your 8 Mile moments? That's my favorite way to describe it, is like the 8 Mile moments growing up. And then I want to ask you, do you think it is genetic? Is it environmental? So like your upbringing, who you were around, is it a combination? And then kind of sprinkle that all over your story.
Well, you know, that's interesting. I would tend to believe that it's more environmental than genetic. I mean, genetic's so hard, like to it's a hard one to kind of wrap your head around, even in your own experience.
And
like,
it goes back to what we talked about way the hell back, talking about the sauna and music
yeah,
and how it affects you physiologically,
yeah,
because your environment sets off certain genes that are obviously what you have from birth. So talking about genetics, so like what mom and dad gave you and what you just through luck of the draw have, you know, active or recessive, and then you couple that with your environment activating different genes, and then you genetically, your perception of the world
yeah.
goes out and picks different things to be around. So it's like, I love this question because there's no right or wrong answer.
I'll tell you this. I can recall one of my earliest. I have a handful of early memories that you tripped, and they're, you know, you don't remember everything from when you were very young. You just basically remember some.
Thank God.
Some crucial, right? You remember some crucial fundamental moments. And one thing that I recall from being very, very young, for whatever reason, was my folks put me in a motor development program at UWSP. And that's like one of those strange early memories. And it was like, you know, just stuff like climbing into a fort, or throwing a basketball, or like throwing balls, like stuff, you know, just little athletic things.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was part of that program or if it was a different thing, but I remember being at UWSP's wrestling room. I never was a wrestler growing up. You know, eventually I was never a wrestler. But at the time, I remember being somehow involved in this wrestling room, doing wrestling things, and getting a T-shirt that said, "If you can believe it, you can achieve it." And for some reason, that stuck in my brain.
Yeah.
That I think they were maybe pounding it home to us young kids.
Yep.
And it succeeded, and it stuck in my brain. And now here I am talking about the relationship between optimism and success.
Yep.
So, you know, part of me wonders about like those fundamental times of your upbringing that sort of stick in your brain, and how important those are in building your sense of drive.
Yep.
Like, I also recall around that similar time going on my first backpacking trip.
Where'd you guys go?
With my folks. I think this was in the Porkies.
Okay.
Up in the UP. And I remember growing a fast connection to nature and really quickly understanding its importance to me and how much I enjoyed it. And also going on a long hike and being exhausted, but having a sense of like euphoria, like you get from like working out, you know,
Yep.
all the endorphins that are released and whatnot. And you wonder, you look back to those times and you like, how important were those moments in shaping your direction, your life perspective? I mean, cripes, eventually I went on to be a wilderness ranger for the Forest Service.
That's so awesome.
You know, and it's like that moment is definitely tied to that. You know, those moments like I'm talking about with motor development definitely had a effect on me being involved in sports for the rest of my life. Or, you know, relatively, definitely up until college when I was playing football. But, you know, and then the degree to which, you know, sports have a relationship to, you know, you building a sense of self, your sort of self-belief system.
Yes.
Like, okay, I can do this. Like, you know, just believing in yourself. Like how, you know, I guess to answer your question, I would believe that it's probably more environmental, at least in my experience. I was lucky to have awesome parents, and they were really conscientious of what I was involved in. You know, when you're young, you don't choose what you do. You know? They, you know, involved me in various things that were helpful, you know, as I grew up. Like, I remember something called Destination Imagination.
That's at the university, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there's programs in most school systems.
Yep.
Across the country, actually, and it's a program that basically it's essentially a problem solving competition of
Okay.
sorts, if you will.
Yep.
And there's, various aspects to it, but it gets your creativity stirring. And these days when I'm up on stage and it gets to a section of a song where, there's improv, I essentially use those tools that were created at that time period.
I love it.
Like seeing something, like people ask me how I do like the improv sections of shows, and all it is just looking around and seeing things.
Yeah.
And then letting
Like people and what their energy, or just like
people,
objects in the
it
room.
can be anything. It just whatever you notice. It's really, it's almost, I don't want to say it's superfluous because it really isn't. I mean, everything matters within reason. But, I look around and I see that, and then you let your sort of unconscious self take over. You know words, what words rhyme and what words don't rhyme. But if you can catch a sense of Zen while looking around and sort of observing a space, then that'll lead you into the sort of the fire of improv up on stage.
Are you a big fan of, I don't know how much flow is talked about in music?
Oh, all
the time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's flow is like, I think I say that word several times a day. Like, what is the sense of flow? Like,
have you ever read Csikszentmihalyi's book on flow?
No.
So
it sounds like I probably should.
You should. It's very interesting. So it's just like this psychologist like breaks it down, like does all these tests, all this research. It's like a 30-year study, and they're looking at all these things, and that's they kind of try to break down flow. So not so much like, oh, this is step 1 through 5. You'll get to flow every time. It's not like that. It's more of like, this is going back to environment. This is the environment you need to create for yourself to put yourself in this position to maybe catch flow.
Huh.
So it's a super, and I love it. Like obviously talking about it in coaching and physical performance, but
it's like in terms of flow. Like I'm trying to think of how I might define that myself. Like it's almost like reacting. It's almost like attached to the word Zen to some degree, like reacting appropriately to circumstance as it sort of emerges in front of you. It's almost like attached to mindfulness, like being present, being like alert.
Yep.
That's an interesting concept.
That's
for
exactly
sure.
what
music is like that. In that especially in a band like ours, where we discussed this briefly before we started this podcast, but especially when we jam, which we've chosen to do, like we've quote unquote jam bands are typically people who have a difficult time playing a song the same way every single time, and it's not because they can't. Most of these musicians certainly could, but it's because you want to open up the door for and allow for flow. Which is kind of to what you were just discussing, like creating the circumstances for flow or for you to be able to sort of catch the flow. And you're not always going to, that's for sure. I mean, sometimes it can get pretty wonky up there. So sometimes our music falls off the deep end.
Because all it takes is for one person to not be physically present, mindful.
Right.
Maybe one of the guys has got some crazy shit going on.
Exactly. Their dog passed away.
Yeah, and it affects everyone.
Speaking of being distracted, I'm at the end of my beer and I have to use the restroom.
Oh, that's fine, man. I've got experienced bladder, so we can stop.
All right.